Welcome to Chasing the Beats, a show dedicated to weeklybeats.com artists, their songs, and stories from the 2024 season. I'm your host, SQF. Our guest today goes by mwmwmw on Weekly Beats and is known by a bunch of other names we'll get into. All right.
Sweet.
Today we've got Gravecat, as we know him on Discord, but I'm just now learning about all of his other pseudonyms on the internet. So why don't you go ahead and list them off?
All right. Well, there's mwmwmw, which is it's actually just supposed to be like a triangle wave, like the triangle bass wave from the Nintendo.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and that's kind of like my coder alias. That's like Discord, or not Discord. GitHub and all that kind of stuff. And then
And your
I
Weekly
have-
Beats name.
and the Weekly Beats name, and usually it's like I sign up for something and I'm like, who am I on?
MWMWMW.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
and so there's that, and like I am known to some people as Winnie the Shit, and Winnie the Shit is the Force City Laptop National DJ Champion. And then to other people, most people, I'm known as Spark, and I wrote IDM back in the day for record labels like Hyman and N5MD, and had one release out on Merc, which was a split 7-inch with Decepticon. And
All
so,
right.
and now my latest alias, because I just, I'm like, I just
We
need another
evolve, we
alias.
evolve,
That's
yeah.
right, I evolved. It's called Matter Warlocks, and that's for YouTube. And I just do live stuff, like almost like live
Cool.
jams. So that's kind of that's the brand, I guess.
Got it. And it's live on what equipment?
The Dirty Wave M8, the Launchpad Pro 3 Mark 3 or whatever it is. I've got a MIDI twister, like sending control data, and then I've also got a Syntact, an Electron Syntact.
Nice.
I have some other gear too, like a DX7 and a modular and all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to try to keep it small,
Minimal.
mostly because like I just, you got to set all that stuff up, and
Yeah.
if I do something with that, I want it to be like very like I kind of had this idea of doing how to program the DX7 like tutorial video, because I think a lot of people don't know how to program that synth when they get it. They're like, this is hard. Like I hear people complaining about how hard it is all the time, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not that hard. But
Let me show you.
It's not that hard. However, if you come at it from like another synth, like if you had like a Moog or something like that, you'd be like, I don't know what to do with this thing.
Got
like,
it.
at all. It's kind of
different. I've never programmed one before.
Yeah, it's like there's only one slider to input stuff with, and then you have to like choose the different buttons and choose the different algorithms to use. So it's like, it's complicated, but it's not difficult. And once you understand like once you think about it the way it wants you to think about it, it's totally like you just get into the flow with it.
It's not complicated, it's different.
Yeah, it is. It's like an alien, right?
And once you know how to talk with the alien, then it's not so complicated.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. It's like that movie Arrival, right? You just have to learn. You have to learn its communication method, which is unusual.
Yes. And I take it from your long-ish sounding musical career that this is not your first Weekly Beats?
Actually, it is my first Weekly Beats.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's actually surprising.
Yeah, and I think in the 90s I made music, in the 2000s I made music, and in the 2010s I made music, but I didn't make as much. And I think the reason for that is because everything went on social media, and I kind of lost those communities a little bit. Or like because we used to do these things called mix-its, where we would have like a sample would get posted, and then you had to make your song around that whole sample. And so, we did a lot of jams like that. And you could just release music onto the, like, imagine if there was a channel, I guess there is a channel in the Discord that was like your song. And, it is kind of, it is sort of like that. But
But it was a different time back then.
it's a different time, and like you could make your own, like, it was sort of like Instagram, your like own like little image for it and everything like that.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't putting out a record, I was putting out songs there.
Got it.
And I remember people would always be like, "Oh, like, oh, why are you wasting your time doing this?" I'm like, "This is my community. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
like there's the people who buy records, and then there's these people who are like, they're
Yeah.
like, none of these people are ever going to buy my record. They're like people that know me."
We're all just having fun making music together.
That's right, exactly. And it was never really about that. and then I think, like, I'm kind of one of those people that even in a bad, let's say a bad time when I'm not making any music, I'll still make like 30 tracks in a year. That's kind of like I'm always making stuff. So I kind of got down to this point at the very end of the 2010s where I was making like 4 or 5 songs a year. And I was kind of like, I think this is done. Like, I think it's like maybe this is over. And I remember kind of
Like,
having
just
this,
the music making hobby or craft, you were just like, maybe I'm over it."
and I was like, maybe the world at large is kind of over me putting it out there, like even
Got
friends,
it.
like those communities, all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, I remember having this kind of moment where I was like, well, I'll just make it for myself. No big deal. Like, I can just keep on doing stuff. And I really did that. But I think that led to a much less finishing focus on things,
Mhm.
and just kind of like, you practice or you noodle around and whatever. And that's good. It's good to do that sort of thing too, and like, and learn and all that kind of stuff. And I kept on buying little bits of gear. Like I bought the OPZ when it came out, and I bought the Octatrack when it
Mhm.
came out. And I was like, hey, this stuff's cool. And, had a bunch of synths and stuff like that. And it just, I made a bunch of music with it, but it never quite clicked. And I never really felt like it was good. And I remember, I swear to God, I kept on having dreams, or maybe I was just like scrolling past the Dirty Wave post on Instagram or something like that. But I was like, I need to get like a Raspberry Pi and like put a tracker on it. you know? Like, and I just want to have a tracker that I can like sit in front of the couch or sit in front of the TV and just like make music on it, and like,
Yeah.
whatever. And like, if it's Fast Tracker that's on there, Impulse Tracker, or what, all these old trackers on there, I was like, I didn't really care. I just wanted it to be like that accessible. And
Right.
like my friend's like, well, just get a laptop and put Renoise in it. I was like, no, a laptop's a computer. Now it's like, now I'm on the internet. Like, yeah,
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
I
And
don't wanna
so,
be on a computer making music.
yeah. And so I got the Polyend tracker, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is it. This is a hardware tracker. This is my machine. And I started playing around with that thing, and I was like, I hate this. Like,
Interesting. I've
I do
always been
not.
curious to
Yeah.
try one, but I'm like, why would I try one now? I have the M8, so
Well, do you like trackers? Like, if you like
this
trackers,
is
the Polyend.
my
Yeah.
only the M8's like my first real tracker experience.
So yeah, M8's a different like a different character for sure than a standard old school tracker. Like, it has like the way that it deals with patterns and phrases and chaining and all that kind of stuff is totally different. And
Interesting.
so yeah, and like it's really powerful, and I think that
So
it's
what
kind of the,
didn't you like about Polyend?
I don't know. Like, it had
Just
everything.
didn't jive with it.
Yeah, it's like for whatever reason I just got in there and I was like, like, I don't know. It's like, I think you have kind of certain expectations around like what you're going to be able to do from a sound design perspective. And I think that, like, with something, let's say like Fast Tracker or Renoise, I can be like, okay, go in there, generate a tone or load in a sample, like drag a sample in and like start chopping it up and doing things with it. And there was just something about the Polyend tracker that I was like, this isn't working for me. Like, I don't feel
Mm,
like I'm in the flow with this thing at all. I feel like I'm kind of coming up against it in a lot of ways.
got it.
and I made this really weird album on it, which I still sometimes think maybe I should put that out because it's like all recorded off the radio, which is like it has a radio built in. So I was just sampling off the radio
Okay.
and like making like just like really really like terror music, you know, like you know, like just it's all very like you know, like just weird stuff, right? And
I kind
so
of want to hear it now.
yeah, right. I sent it to a friend of mine once, and he's like, "What are you into right now? Like, what is going on with this? Like, it's just it's bad. You know what I mean? But it's like I really, you know, it was very purposeful when I made it.
It's a moment in time.
That's right. And so, you know, that if I was feeling like screw this before that, I was like, you know, the clouds opened up and like this device came down in front of me and it was like, here's the hardware that you need. You know what I mean? Like this
Here's the
is what
Game
you
Boy you're
want.
looking for.
Yeah, this is what you want, you know? And that didn't work for me. And then I was like, what the hell? And then I saw the M8 and I saw that it was based kind of like on LSDJ. And I was like, all right, this is it. Like, if this machine can't track for me, if I can't make some music with this thing, like, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. Like
Then it's
the
for real
fire
over.
the fire has gone out, and like not only
Yeah.
that, but like the like the scene has let me know. You know, like right? It's like you've been sent
Yeah.
your walking papers by the
Yeah.
music community, basically.
You hang
So
up your headphones and walk away.
that's right. And so I got that thing, and before, like, because you know the pre-order wait times are like
Yeah.
enormous, and so I ordered it and immediately put LSDJ on a Game Boy, and I had used it, you know, years and years ago, like years and years and years and years and years ago, like 2007. I had made an album with the MIDI NES and a VSS 30 and a Game Boy. So I was like familiar with using this type of equipment and had used Nano Loop. Actually, I still have my original Nano Loop cart. And like from there was like, all right, well, I'll just teach because I know the interface is the same. I think some people get headless. I just put LSDG on this Game Boy and started making stuff and kind of learning about it. And when the M8 actually arrived, it was like, I think maybe like a day and a half before I was like, okay, I get it. I know how this works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think my first couple of tracks that I made, like the first stuff that I made with that stuff, like really sucked. And I was really frustrated because, like, you know, I'm kind of used to making things at a really high level and like being like super creative. And I was like, no, you know, like I'm not gonna give up.
Not there.
Right. And like, but I'm on the edge. Like
Yeah.
I really can't express like how on the edge I am. And so I just start carrying it around with me everywhere. Like I'm like, it's portable. That's what I wanted. And and sometimes I think that I carry my M8 around with me everywhere, like as a kind of like talisman. It's not even like I don't even necessarily need to write music. It's just that like I'm kind of like a it's like my samurai sword. Like why would I leave this somewhere? Do you know what I mean? It's like this is my thing. Like I have this.
Yeah. You're
You know,
connecting with it even when it's off.
that's right. And so I'm sort of believing in it. And
Yeah.
I read
This is too
I
precious to leave at home.
yeah, and so Rick Rubin came out with this book called The Creative Act.
Yes. So just to interject a little bit about that book is I had just before I got that book got a Synthrum deluge and had just started getting back into music and then read that book and was like, oh yeah, I just need to like actually put stuff out.
Exactly.
I just
So
need to make shit and throw it into the world.
exactly.
Rick told me
And
it's okay.
yeah, it's you know, and so I read that book and I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of stuff in that book where I was like this is really really stupid. Like I don't get this
Oh
as
yeah, it's a little
right?
rah rah, you know.
right? And I was like, I really don't, I really don't get it. But I was like almost kind of like, almost kind of like getting a pat on the back, or like, you'll have like a nice conversation with your mom or something. It kind of fills your cup up, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, your tire, like we call it, you're getting your tires pumped up, right? Okay, now
Yeah.
you're good to go. That's what that book did. And it was like a switch. It was like suddenly I went from like hating everything that I was doing, not wanting to write music anymore, and like literally the next day feeling the complete opposite. And the M8 and I were like, it's like I had like a little like halo around us. You know what I mean? Like it was thinking what I was thinking, and I was
Yeah.
thinking what it was thinking, and then that was it.
And
And so I
then
made two
it's patting
albums.
you on the back and everything's great.
Yeah, exactly. And so I made two albums that year, Old
Awesome.
Growth and Child of the Lynx. And, I really liked both of them. They didn't, I didn't even really share them with my music friends or anything like that. I was like, no, these are for me. This is like, I have to kind of dust off, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so and then when Weekly Beats came along, I can't even remember. Like I was probably just like being a jackass on the Discord one day, and it was like, "Oh, Weekly Beats is starting," and I was like, "I should do Weekly Beats." Like that's like, I was like, I can just keep going. Like I'll just make a track every day. And went to a buddy and said, "Hey, do you want to do Weekly Beats with me?" And he's like, "No, I'm not into doing that sort of thing, challenges." And I was like, "All right,
All right.
I'm on my own. I'll go I'll go do this challenge all on my own." And like really loved the entire process. I don't think I really sweat like one track on that whole thing. Where like I think I was actually kind of one of the first people to always post my track every week. Like I never left, like once or twice I left it to the last minute, but for the most part, doing a track every week for me is not a big ask. And I went to school for music, so I had homework that was like write a song for tomorrow,
Got
and
it.
so yeah,
You had much tighter deadlines in the past.
considerably. And so I know that at the start of Weekly Beats, my sort of self odometer or whatever was like, it takes me 4 hours to make a track, top to
Yeah.
bottom, sound design, writing, recording, mastering, all that stuff. And I think after Weekly Beats, I'm like, if you need a track by the end of the hour,
Oh
you know,
shit.
and you need it, and it's like 80%, you know what I mean? Like if you need it, like, if you want 100% or 110%, obviously, like, kind of scales, log or exponentially,
Yeah.
right? The time. But if you need like a pretty good track, in an hour, I can do that now, like no problem. Like
Got
just
it.
like sit down and be like, I've got my whole process worked out, and just like, knock it out of the park kind of thing. So that's what Weekly Beats did to me, was like the actual extraction of the music part is re-
Optimized your workflow.
yeah, I'm like, the M8 has done that for me as well. Just, yeah, the weird thing is too, is that just the M8 workflow, and like how you think about music when you're making stuff on the M8, I feel like actually expands out to other gear. Like if you start using other gear now, you'll be like, oh yeah, like I need to make this part and this part, and I can do this and I can do this, and let's keep this separate, and then like put these together, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
totally, like that's like when I use the Syntact. Like I got the Syntact, and there's a YouTube video of like basically the first thing that I make on that, and I'm like, this was great. Like this is like done.
Yeah.
Recorded.
I
Yeah.
recently got a Digitone too, because I've always
Hmm.
been curious about the, quote unquote electron workflow, but also been a little intimidated by it. But after getting it, I'm like, a couple days later, I'm like, yeah, this all makes sense. Maybe I don't have all the tricks figured out, but I think, like you said, coming from an M8, these machines are primarily looping and moving to different phases. Like,
Yeah.
there's definitely more limitations on the Digitone versus the M8, but I think it's kind of good to embrace some limitations in places.
Well, back in the day, there was this tracker called Buzz. That's another thing. If you go on the Discord and you were to say something like, "I just found Buzz Tracker," like you'll find the Buzz Tracker guys in there, right? They're
Like, here we
there
are.
lurking.
Here we are.
They're there lurking around. You'll find them, and that thing had patterns and sequences very similar to what the M8 has, but the sequencer was like you could just drop a pattern anywhere on any tick. So if you had a pattern, like if you had, you know, if you'd made, let's say, two melodies, you could start one melody on like the first beat and the second melody on like the
Okay.
second beat, or you know what I mean? Like you could kind of
Yeah.
put anything anywhere. And that was just such an amazing workflow to have because if you were playing live with it, it was awesome because you're like, I'll just set a loop up here on the first, like whatever, 8 bars and let it play. But then you just let that end loop go. The playhead keeps tracking essentially.
Hmm.
And then you can start putting in all sorts of like pads and beds and all kinds of like effects and everything like that. And then lock that off as a loop as the loop start endpoint again. But then
Ah.
even just like uncap the start point and it would like loop back up to the top.
Oh,
Right.
that's cool.
Yeah. And so you could just keep going like that for hours. You build your track out in one dimension, you build your track out in the other dimension, and then you go into a live show and you're like, all right, we're just going to go down and to the left, for the
Got
next
it.
couple hours. Yeah, it was sweet. And
That's
the
cool.
the M8 sequencer is the closest thing to that vibe in a sequencer that I've had since. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why it's so productive for me, is because it's very musical in the sense that when things come in is a lot more organic. Like, like if you use a DAW like Cubase, which I know, like that's my other DAW that I use for everything. And you can just kind of have things go anywhere. Like, that's it's completely free form. You're like,
Yeah.
this is going to start playing on the, you know 256th subtick of this
Right.
quarter note, you know
Hmm.
and they can just start from there, kind of
Wherever.
thing. Yeah, wherever you want. And so, like I feel like that is a big part of making like really organic or interesting music, is to have some variability, or like polyrhythms. Like, can you, like, you think about polyrhythm in your drumming, but can you have like poly sequences? And so like the stuff like the M8 lets you do that sort of poly sequence where you have a 4-bar chunk, a 6-bar chunk, an 8-bar chunk,
Right.
and then you just let it all go, and where it all lines up is kind of like whatever, right? Like this
Hmm.
is, and I really enjoy that type of sequencing. I find it natural to do things that way.
So do you use that technique for a lot of your songs, like specifically your weekly beats songs?
Yeah, like on like a lot of my weekly beat stuff. I mean, I used a lot of different techniques in there, and uh, you know, I kind of feel like the bratty little brother sometimes and help me, and I'm like, how do you guys do this? especially Impbox. I don't know if you know him on the Discord, but
Yeah.
he's probably answered like 100 questions that I've had. I'd probably be embarrassed to find out how many questions he's
He's
really
always
answered.
answering people's questions, so
Yeah, like that guy's probably answered like a million questions about the M8 by now. But he was
yeah, and
showing me
then
some.
he's over on the Electron Discord answering questions there too.
Yeah, he just answers questions all day. What a god, like
What a
that's just
god.
like, yeah.
He's helping us all.
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, oh, there's a question, I'll just answer that while this other question is happening, and I'm making a piece of music in the middle of whatever he's doing. Who knows? Yeah, and so I do. I
Yeah,
don't know.
what are some of your, like, go-to techniques on the M8 that you think maybe not a lot of people are doing?
Okay, so my first, like, my number one technique that I think defines the workflow for me is that up top, or like at the very start of the sequence, I have like just pages and pages of combinations of patterns.
Got it.
So I'll go up there, I'll make a pattern, and if there's nothing else on that pattern, I'll just fill the rest with Fs, and I go and I'll copy that and make another one, do some more changes or make a bunch of different stuff, and sort of use that as like a sketchbook or a notebook, and just I
Yeah,
will
I call
fill
this
that.
my like experimentation phase where I'm like,
Yeah.
this kind of works. Let me delete everything and then see if I can add like a little something extra on top of that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get stuck in loops and they try to make like a loop sound good. And what I've learned over the years is to kind of like make your loop and make your loop sound good, but as you go, leave a breadcrumb trail of everything that you do so that
Hmm.
when you hit the end of that sort of loop building phase, you can just take all those pieces and go whoop into a song section of your you know project or whatever.
Yeah.
And now you have that whole section. Like that whole experiment was actually a whole chunk of a song that you're playing from beginning to
Yeah.
end. Right?
And then you can like mix and match sections or pull some out that don't work. Or I always call
Exactly.
that like my once I did enough experimentation, I'm like, all right, it's like Wednesday. I need to like get cranking on a song, start arranging.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember someone like I think it was like the first or second week, someone said something like, "The M8 is such a great arranger." And I was like, "I'll just leave the M8 sitting on the desk there, and it could just arrange everything for me then." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Come on, M8, I hear you're good.
Are you
Let's see
done
this
yet?
happen." Yeah, and so I feel like as I started to learn things like how to jump patterns or how to resync everything, those sections of my songs just got crazier and crazier. I resample a lot, so I'll take an entire section of a song and bake it basically into another sample and then pitch it down. Or what I really like to do is just smash it into some distortion, like
Yeah.
like. And now that I have the EQ, I feel like I can
Oh yeah.
really just smash things to smithereens, which I really
The
like to
EQ is
do.
so great.
Yeah, because you can just cut the 500K stuff out, which just ends up getting all potatoy sounding. And I think a lot of the things that I struggle with the weekly beats that I made is I didn't have that EQ in there, and I kind of find it does sound a little potatoy. And I don't know, that's just me being critical. And I never know how bad it is, and that's one of the things too, is I never really try to criticize or analyze what I'm doing until well after it's done. And I think the reason for that is that the some of that stuff that Rick Rubin talks about, the making part of your brain is totally different from the criticizing part of your brain.
Yeah.
And you want to try to nurture that creating part as much as you can. And that's the part that's getting shit done. And the criticizing part of you is great because it's kind of like get you into it's trying to get it's like you're never going to be playing Carnegie Hall with this potato sounding uneq'd smashed drum sample.
Yeah.
Right, but it's like at the time that you're doing that, it's like not helping, right? You're like,
Uh
right. And so what are
yeah, I
some
think I
other
kind of
yeah.
noticed that critique part more like if you've ever been like, I'm going to try and paint a picture. Let me take up watercolor or something. And then you're like, it's really easy to see like shit is not going your way when you're like painting a picture. Like, oh, wow, I'm terrible. I should give this up. It's a little bit
Yeah.
more of a gray area making music where you're like, one day you're going to like it. And then like the next day you come listen to it and you're like, what was I thinking?
Oof. Yeah. Someone out there is listening to this right now and they're going, oof.
Yeah, oof. Oof, you're right. That thing I made last night before I went to bed is like garbage today. But that just means I need to run some more experiments on it and like swap out some stuff and there's still some hope.
Yeah, and I think that, you like getting too tied up in how good it is sometimes, I think, is really a mistake. And one of the reasons why I believe that is if you look at art history, or you look at kind of like an artist who's like really revered, like let's say Bach, like go talk to somebody and be like, was Bach a good musician? Like, was he a good composer? Like, you'll get a unanimous yes. There's not going
Yeah.
to be that. Like, I'm sure there's that one guy out there who's gonna be like, yeah, he's all right.
I hate that guy.
Yeah, or sure, because everything can't be for everyone. But and you're like, how much of that is like marketing or whatever? But in his own time, people didn't really like that kind of work. Like
Yeah.
people actually made fun of Baroque music, and actually Baroque, the term that we use to define it now, was actually an insult at the time. So it's like an entire genre is defined by an insult to an artist in his own time. And it wasn't until like 150 years later that people were like, "Ah, no, this hits,"
This
like
is fire. This is
yeah.
fire.
That's right. Why do we just like what are we worried about? And so
Yeah.
now I'm like, every time I kind of make this point, people are like, "Oh, so you think you're Bach?" And I'm like, "No." But what I'm saying
No,
is
not what I'm
that
saying.
Bach was making his stuff without without the bros down at the music hall like pumping his tires every day, being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is fire," like they
Bach
hated
was
him.
cooking in his own kitchen, and he didn't give a damn what anyone else thought.
That's right. And he had patrons and he had people that obviously liked and revered his music. Like, but that's kind of all you need. It's like you need one person. You don't need the like hoi polloi to tell you,
Yeah.
your music's good. And I
See,
kind of
I
feel
I
like
have Jegasus, and he just tells me all my stuff is great. So that's I make music for Jegasus now.
right. And the thing about that too is that like I'm willing to bet that there are more people exuberant and excited about music in the way that Jagesis is than we would ever give credit for, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like whenever I think of like something like people are like I'll see like medieval town metal is getting popular, and I'm like, no, that can't be true, but it is, and I can sit there and be like, that's bad or whatever, or like whatever I think, and
But
like it doesn't,
somebody loves it.
and somebody should and somebody can, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it has just as much of a right to be the cool thing that everyone else is into as anything else. Like like Rick Astley, is that who I'm thinking of? Who's no Rickrolled, the Rickrolled guy. Never
Yeah.
gonna
Never gonna
give
give you
you
up.
yeah. He was popular, right? And or like a Rebecca Black, like she'd put a DJ mix out recently, and like
True.
people, yeah, and people were like, "Oh, this is sick," and I'm like, like see, like
That's the Friday girl, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I kind of think
See, it's
sometimes,
seared into my memory.
yeah, and you just need to hang in there, right? And publishing your works, like yeah, like coming up with stuff, putting it out, publishing it, and not just nowadays is putting it up on the internet or putting it up somewhere semi-permanent like YouTube. Who knows what YouTube will be in 100 years or something like that. But so that someone can find you eventually, as and it would be nice if that happened in your lifetime and came with like financial reward and
That
stability,
would be cool. That would be
right?
cool.
Always cool. you know, but it's also just kind of neat to be like, I'm contributing to a fabric and I don't know what the picture on that fabric is yet,
Right.
right? And I'm a part of a movement and the movement has no label yet. Like, modernism and postmodernism and all these isms were like really hot in the 20th century. And now we're kind of in this like, what are our isms?
Yeah.
Like, what is the ism? And it was really funny, like what's the dominant ism of the day? And I was like, we've entered into a period in history now again where there's no sort of like overarching authority that's telling us what phase of
Right.
art we're in, right? And so the
Mhm.
ism will come after we're all dead. Unfortunately, we don't get to know.
Yeah. When people look back and be like, I know what that ism was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, that was the late 20 or like the early 21st century blah. It was the blahs.
Yeah.
Like, who knows, right? Yeah, I don't know.
But
I
I
don't know
mean,
what it.
if you are just making things you enjoy, pushing your own boundaries that excite you, and not worried so much about, where is this going to lie in the landscape of music when people look back, or will I make money from this, or who will actually like this now? Like, those are all sort of things that make it not that fun to make music if you're worried
Yeah,
about all those other things.
yeah. And if you're like if you're one of the people who fits into that pinpoint of like what the sort of machine expects, and that's an authentic expression from yourself. Well, congratulations, you win.
Yeah.
Okay. And
The
like,
machine is happy with you.
that's right. Yeah. Right. And that person has every right to make that music and make it for those reasons as anyone else. Right. And
Mhm.
and just that outside of that machine, there's just this rich there's a rich world of music and sound that is sort of beyond your expectations, and it's outside of your scope of knowledge, and it can be incredibly ignorant at the same time as incredibly insightful. Like, like a lot, like you'll see arguments all the time where people are like, oh, you should learn music theory. And I've learned a ton of music theory. I had a mastering engineer once tell me that I've forgotten more music theory than most people will ever know. And
Yeah.
I think that that's a funny thing to say. One, because it's not true, but I I think that knowing knowing music theory is one thing. Knowing where that music theory came from and why we see it as something to aspire to is like this kind of meta analysis of music theory. And once you start to dig at or pick away at what the music theory, that if you go to Amazon, you're like music theory and you get a book and you're like, what's this music theory about? Or like, where did this come from? If you knew how that music theory was compiled, you would be deeply unsatisfied in the sense that you'd be like, there's all this stuff that we're missing. Like, there's like, we've left out so much to make it like, God, an easy way to write songs. You're like,
Here's the circle of fifths.
yeah, yeah, right. And, and so you have, so like, go make a circle out of every interval. Go make a circle out of anything that you can make a circle out of. How many circles can you make? How many circles can you make out of an augmented chord? Okay, I could tell you 4. There's only 4. It's like if you don't count inversions, there's only 4 total augmented chords, and you might be like, well, so what? And I'm like, well, that's great. That's great news. If you need to pivot or you need a key change, the augmented chord's the thing that you want to go to. It's like this little nexus that combines all keys because there's only 4 of them. You can go through that.
A
But that's
portal.
not, yeah, it's like a portal. And, like, where's the page that's like the portal to key changes, the augmented chord, And like, but it's
That's
just
in the
kind of like,
second edition.
yeah, there is no second edition. Right? It's like I have The Complete Musician by Stephen G. Lates or whatever, and there's only one edition. You read the book and you're complete, done. You get to
Yeah.
the end and you're like, I know how to do it all now.
But
And
it's music theory is just another tool
mhm.
of many tools to help you in songwriting. It's not like this magic bullet that, oh, I get this music theory book and then all of a sudden my songs are amazing. Now I'm happy with them.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's the other thing. It's like if you're writing music and you think that something's gonna make you happy with the music that you're making, like just quit right now.
Just one more cent.
Just stop. That's not happening. It's like no gear or book or thing that you can cram into your head will ever help you in that way.
No,
only
it's
only
all in
writing it.
here.
That's right. That's right. That
But the Rick Rubin book might help a little bit.
that might help a little bit actually.
Yeah,
That and
might
it's
help a little.
and he's like it's nothing to do with music really at that point. It's kind of more like why don't you think you're special? And you're like, yeah, good question. It's like you've
Yeah.
got just as much
Hmm.
right to your thoughts as everyone else does. And there's kind of this, belief. It's like, oh, so everyone gets a trophy, and I kind of feel like that can undermine our self-esteem as much as build it up sometimes. But I don't think that's really what he's getting at. I think he's getting at like if you have a vision, like don't get in your way and be like, it's not going to be good enough. He's like, just go and
Yeah.
do it and then figure that part out second,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
And just keep doing that. You're gonna
Just keep
learn.
making it.
I think that's what Weekly Beats taught me is like you're gonna learn a lot more about music making and about yourself just like cranking it out, not necessarily being super critical of what you're putting out, but you're gonna get better.
Yeah. Just automatically. Even
Just
like get better
automatically.
at yeah. And like it's like exercise. It's like, I'll see people say stuff like, I don't read. I'm like, read one page.
Yeah.
Like just
And then you'll
right.
read like 10.
Yeah, right. Just start with some little thing. It's not like it's like, like you talk to your friend or something, they're like, I just ran the Iron Man. You're like, come with me next weekend and run the Iron Man. Like don't.
No,
you know,
that's a bad
right?
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna hurt yourself, right?
Well, should we get into the music?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What do you got for me?
Cool. We're gonna start with Silver Witch.
Ooh, yeah, okay.
All right, let's hit it. All right, that was Silver Witch early in the year, week 4. What made this one of your top 3 picks from the year?
Well, I think it's one of those songs that when I wrote it, I was like, "This is so me." Like this is like,
All right.
like I've probably written some sort of version of this song going all the way back to like 1996. Like I have like
Got
a
it.
it's and so it's almost kind of like a little muse that visits me every once in a while.
It's like
And
your home base.
yeah, and it's like, "Oh yeah, remember this, right? Like this is what you're into, right?
And then
This is
Silver Witch
you."
plays.
Yeah. And or like, that starts to come out. And yeah, and so I was like, "Well, let's put like cuz we're doing this, let's put a name to it. Let's figure out like okay, this is kind of like we're going to go deep here." And I had this experience once. I'll just keep it PG. But it ended up with me being in this place where there was these two figures sitting on this couch in front of me, and one was this old woman and she was very upset with me, and there was this old man and he was just kind of like leaning back. He was like super chill, and you can tell that he was kind of like deferential, but like he was upset too, but he's kind of just more like, he'll just let him go, he'll figure it out, you know
Yeah.
and so I I don't know why, but I know that vision and that song, or that reoccurring theme that comes up every once in a while, are connected somewhere. Even if it's just through me, just because it's
Yeah.
like these are like two very like personal ideas that keep coming up. And so I was like, what do I call that person? What do I call that angry lady in my head? you know? And so
The
I was like,
Silver
hey, like,
Witch.
and so she's the silver witch. And you know, it's one of those things, like if I go and I play that song live, like people will always say something to me about that one specifically. And so that's how I know that the sound of it, kind of like the overall structure, and like me as a physical presence all line up. It's like I'm
Got
wearing
it.
the right suit and I'm projecting the right thing. Like
I love
all the
that.
planets, all the it's like the scene in 2001 where all the planets come together and you're like, that's everything all lined up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things. So it doesn't even need to be good, because it just is that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like you said, it fits you, and the way other people view it when you play it live is like kind of the complete picture. I like
that's right.
the mix of what it kind of sounds like you're making break beats on the M8, but then also mixing in like some breakbeat samples.
I am.
I like the kind of like how they switch, and those like kind of horn sounds. Like I I'm curious how much just like raw sound design you're doing on the M8, or if you use a lot of samples, because you have a lot of great sound design.
I do primarily the sound design on the M8,
Cool.
and it's mm, it's funny because I think of sound design as something that I really struggle with, and so maybe that's just
Interesting.
I put effort into it, and I try to make the M8 make interesting sounds. And it's kind of
Mhm.
funny that I hear sometimes people make something on the M8 and it sounds like super video gamey. Like it sounds like it just like popped
Like
off of
chip
like a
tuning.
like chip tuning, and I'm like, wow, how do they do that? And I think that and I think the funny thing for me is that I'm like, I think that that's probably like specifically what the M8 is good at. But for whatever reason, I go off in some sort of like deep end where I'm like,
Yeah.
I found this weird corner over here, guys. You
You're like, I
know,
can't even get back to Mario coins.
yeah, right. And I think, and I
How do you
think,
even do that anymore?
yeah, a little bit. It's like, and I just know that it's a part of my process to go in and to, you know, find the organic sound in there. Like,
Mhm.
I've had people, like many people over the years, be like, "Oh, you're like the analog synth guy," and I'll be like, "No, I'm not. I do nothing on analog synths. Every synth that I use is digital and has always been digital. I've even got a modular synth." And you might be like, "Well, that's analog." And like the oscillator that I have in that thing is like the IntelliGel Cylonix shapeshifter, and is like the most like over the top digital oscillator you can have. It is like it's like it's like if we left Earth and all of our video games like started to like proliferate, like Skynet like take over the planet, and we came back like BattleTech like
Yeah.
10,000 years from now, they'd all be psionic shapeshifters. Like right?
Far
Like,
from analog.
yeah, yeah. It's just like
Yeah.
totally bananas, like FPGA based, like table reading, like,
But
nonsense. Just like,
you somehow figure out a way to get these, like you said, kind of natural sounding sounds far away from the chiptune land.
yeah, and sometimes I think, does it actually sound far away from the chiptune land? Like, am I just blind? Is it just a blind spot? Like, I don't actually know. Sometimes I think it's probably more in line with chiptune than, like, I have nothing against chiptune. I think chiptune's amazing. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, and the features of the sounds, like when people make that real, it's like anything else. When someone makes a real sounding jungle song or a real sounding chiptune song, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, they've mastered it,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't necessarily ever feel like I fall into any of those like little
Yeah.
like, I never do something where they're like, oh, clearly you are trying to do this and you've
Right.
succeeded masterfully. I think I go in and I just explore, and I say, wow, what a great sound. Like, this just pops right out of the speakers at me, or whatever, or this can sit in the background, or whatever the purpose
Right.
is for it.
That's kind
And
of
I
what I've
put that
learned
together.
is it's like how I approach sound design in the M8 is it's more about how, like, one, do I like the sound, and how does it fit next to the other sounds that I have going on, that
Yeah.
you you don't always get that freedom if you're just like pulling in a sample or using like a preset library or just like not even touching any of the settings.
Yeah, and I was talking today on the Discord, and I was talking, like, someone had made like a really great track on there, and I was just sort of sharing some thoughts about the mixing of it. And they were like, well, you can't really do a lot of like deep mixing on the M8. And so I actually see switching out the sample or what the instrument is as a way of mixing on the M8. Like, if
Yes.
you're in there and you're like, this sound is not working on this part, is you actually duplicate it and edit it so that it does sound good, or completely replace it, whatever it needs, and
Mhm.
you put that in that spot. And if no one can tell, that's great, you know? And like, you can even kind of screw yourself over, because later on you're like, what sound was I using there? Oh, yeah, this one. And it's like, no, that's the wrong one. You've used the wrong thing. And so
Yeah.
you can, yeah, you go in and you try to mess with things to the point, to a degree where, you know, like, that whole mentality of like bringing up the levels and using EQ was something like, up until like very recently on the M8, you couldn't do.
Right.
Like, you still don't have like a compressor on each channel that you can use to like get a little bit more
Yeah.
bite out of something. So you got to go to your envelopes to do that. And you don't have, or you didn't have EQ. So you'd have to go to sound design to do that. And so I
Which
think I just got
sometimes
used.
still helps more than just the EQ.
Yeah. And it's interesting that one of my teachers in school, he was always on me for like trying to change sounds too much in the mixing process, and he's like, don't try to change the sound, like just let it be, just like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the sound is just what it is, and there's nothing you can do
Yeah.
about it. And by trying to change it, you actually bring more attention to what's wrong with it.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes you just need to turn something down by like a dB, and the problem with it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And the M8's perfect for that. It's like everyone should just learn to mix on the M8 so that when you get to like a real studio, like a real facility, you're like, I don't need all that stuff. We're getting the right sound with the right mic at the
I
right time, the right performance.
I did it all on my M8 before, so we're good.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna keep it moving with Vapor Charm. Here we go.
Mm.
All right, that was Vapor Charm. Really cool ambient start to that one. What about this one made it your number 2? Or one of your 3, I'll say.
Right. Well, one is to do that intro. I just recorded it straight into the M8. And if you listen close to that track, you can hear, because I'm playing it over USB, I'm getting the occasional dropout. So there's like in this smooth, perfect ambience, like a click. And so
Yeah.
I've got to at some point go in there and like clean that stuff out. But I left it in for weekly beats because I was like, I want to talk about this, or I want to nag about this on like the bug fixes or something like that.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, I recorded this, you got to try to make this not happen somehow. And I think I did that track all in one sitting. Like I just sat down
Oh,
and made
wow.
it. And I was like, okay, this is perfect. And I feel like whenever you can just like you have an idea and it just kind of comes out and works, it's really great. It's like a really true expression.
Oh,
So kind of
yeah.
like the first track, like it's like really me. It's like a really me thing. And then I went and I made a video for it. And one of the things or like the video is like all surfing waves. Like it's just like people
Love
getting
that.
rolled under waves and surfing. And but it's all data moshed. So it's all like kind of glitching out and freaking out. And
From the
I don't know, I just
USB.
yeah, exactly
Yeah.
like the buffer underrun. So it was like, so
But
it was
that
yeah,
matches up with like these sort of like pulsing noise, almost like risers, but I definitely got like a wave vibe from it.
yeah, and when I was writing, or like when I sat down to write that song, it was sure like a gee, I would sure like to be on a beach, like surfing or something like that right now, not going through what I'm going through right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it was like very like wishful thinking. And I think it does have a bit of that like lulling or soothing, like it's almost kind of like a little lullaby, like it's got a little lullaby line in there. But even just like the way the bass movement works, it's like very like, you're okay. Go to sleep. you know and I think that I am in the midst of that song like soothing myself. It'd be hard
Got
to
it.
be like, I don't typically sit down and go like, I'm doing art therapy today, you know
Yeah.
but I do, when I get too stressed out, we'll like kind of retreat, I guess, into like art and try to do that as much as possible. So yeah, I don't know, that's what it's about. It is
Cool.
definitely, i think I think the ocean sounds are weren't necessarily like deliberate. I wasn't like, I'm gonna make waves, but I've always loved the sound of ocean waves. So I
Mhm.
think whenever I kind of come across that sound, I'm like, yeah, perfect. I always
Yeah.
thought maybe it was too shiny, like, or too loud, like those waves were too loud.
Mhm.
And I just kind of feel like that's okay sometimes too, because you're kind of forcing it, and maybe someone's like kind of ducking back and going like, ooh, and I'm like, that's
Yeah, I
fairly
could
real.
I
Yeah,
mean, I kind of took them as sort of they were like risers, but coming in more frequently than you would use a riser. So it definitely gave it more of that like ocean wave feeling.
right.
I also really love the bass that you made. And then, it's like kind of this steady bass. And then every once in a while, it does some like fast jumps in the notes that keeps it really interesting. And I always struggle to make this kind of music because I'm kind of like an impatient person, and so have a hard time sitting with my own music and like developing a long ambient intro like that. Even though it's something I enjoy listening to, I think making the music, I feel like people listening to it are like, come on, get to the good stuff, you know?
I totally know what you mean, and I think that so what? They're, you know,
Slow
like,
down, man, and just like make some cool stuff.
yeah, I'm very much a like slow is cool, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think and even though like a lot of my music is fast paced or like I enjoy fast paced music, you know, there's like if you struggle making that type of music because you're like, I want the end or I want the stuff to come in. Okay, here's my tip for that is make a piece of ambient music start to finish. Like do the whole thing. And then glue some other song on top of it. Like make that song, make that other part and try to put those two things together like a little DJ mix, right?
Gotta, yeah.
And then yeah, and then like or like, you know, flip that around. Say, okay, I've got this song. I made this beat or whatever, and it's really cool. What silence can I create for it with that ambient section, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, like almost kind of like you're gonna like set off some kind of like crazy spell, and you've got to get all the like elements flowing first, right? And then whatever that
I like
thing
that.
is, you drop into the middle, right? And like that, like just think about it as as two completely separate things, but like related because you know you are making the listener have to go through a transition. Like
Right.
what if like, you know, because I think about like if I start this ambient thing up and someone's like, "Oh, yeah, this is what I'm into right now, I'm like totally vibing with this," and then I hit like a wave crash with like some deep bass over top of that, like, you know,
You're like, I was almost asleep. What the hell?
yeah. or you or you know like, oh, like this isn't where I thought it was going, or
Yeah.
this isn't what I was hoping for this song to be, which, you know, that's the composer's struggle, right? Like,
Yeah.
what sound are you making and how long can the audience withstand it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there is a lot of my workflow sometimes that is like comes out in pairs. Like things come out, there's two ideas that come out at the same time, and I
Got
have
it,
to kind
yeah.
of like and sometimes it's two songs. Like sometimes I'll sit down and I'll literally make two songs, like, and they're related.
And
Um
then sometimes it's a long intro and an outro, you know?
Most of the time it's this like really shitty first idea and then really great second idea, almost
I
like,
feel that.
yeah, right. and and I'm always like, if you're ever stuck making music and you've got this really bad first idea and you're like what can I do about this, just make a new one. Like I've like
Yeah.
literally sat there and been like, new. Like,
I ran out of phrases the other day
oh
just as I
nice.
had come to, like, a decent idea, and I was just like I just deleted everything else, like, delete change, like, "Alright, we're starting over with, like, this one row."
Yep, nice. Yeah, see,
Yeah.
and like sometimes it's just that, like you're right, like you just got to experiment, and getting through all those experiments is like,
Get
you
through the
know what?
trash.
Yeah, you got to get through the crap.
Alright, we're gonna keep it going with Occulta Cultro. Did I say that right?
Nice. Yep.
Alright. All right, that was Occulta Culturo. What made that one of your three?
I just think it's like a really big, hyped up song, but it doesn't try to like oversell itself too much. I think there's still kind of a minimalism happening in there somewhere,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's somewhere in the middle of Weekly Beats. I was like, I really want to do some like kind of traditional dubstep, like early dubstep, before it got too like buzzy and loud, and
like
you know
super glitchy.
yeah, and like super super glitchy, exactly, like produced, I guess.
Yeah.
And so so I just went in, like, I think it's just really the magic of the M8 is you can just kind of go in there and just make a million little sounds, and
Yeah.
spend 5 minutes on something that goes like and like use it once. Right.
No, but you
And
do a really good job of like creating all these little like sonic elements that are going on that aren't necessarily percussive. They're not necessarily melodic things happening, but just like little bits of ear candy.
yeah, and I always think I could do more. Like I sometimes I think like, oh man, like really push it, like take it to like the absolute extreme. And I'm like, I don't know where that is. And that's sort of like for Weekly Beats 2026. My God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of my plan, is to like, is every, like, maybe go for a little bit shorter duration, but like really
Just go
shoot for the
wild.
stars with like every bit of sound design, like really try to hammer it out as much as possible.
I'm excited to hear what 2026 brings.
Yeah.
Because I can't even fathom what that's like. So
Actually, I'm just into sine tones now, just single sine waves. Just beeps. It's Morse code.
and I love too how that bass just gets like drawn out at the very end. Like I wrote in my notes that it's like some sort of like space age engine shutting down for the day.
Well, like with the sample rate, or the what's the one in the, what do they call it in the M8? The D something. I don't know. I can't remember. Basically,
Detune.
you're just de-resing the whole thing. Like you're bit shifting it.
Yeah.
You're bit chomping it. And on the old, like in the old days, like on the Sound Blaster Pro, if you recorded any kind of bass sound, you would hear that little ringing sound that you get. Like it's aliasing of that bass tone. And I just thought that was just such a cool thing to, at the end of the song, just like let the whole thing ring out. Instead of like a
Mm-hmm.
reverb at the end, it's like a bass verb. It's just like, it's just
Yeah.
expanding out in all directions kind of thing. And, I can just imagine on a sub, or the owner looking at his subwoofer going like, oh my God, like
My
it's going to
precious
light on
sub.
fire. Yeah. I don't think it would, but make him
And
feel that way.
I also wrote in my notes that you inspire me to up my riser game, which I always forget to add in risers, I think, at the end, but I think you execute on them very well.
Okay, we'll make 3 risers because that's all that I have.
Okay.
One, I have
All
an,
right, riser school, everyone.
I have an LFO on the amplitude of noise. Okay, and the LFO is just like the full length, like the max that'll go. And so you drop that in, and it goes, for like
All
however
right,
long.
cool.
Okay,
Riser one.
right. Yep. And so you can do that with the ramp up or the exponential up. If you're doing it with a note, which is what the second riser that I have is, it's just one note, and then you flip it to exponential, and then like as it goes, it'll kind of start off like as a note. So you'll play it as a note in the tracker, but then it'll just slowly go like up
Got
into,
it.
like it'll just zip up into like the highest note that it could possibly play kind of thing at the very last second. And with a little bit of reverb and delay on top of that, you get a little like pew 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 kind of off the end
Yeah.
of it, right? And like the third one that I have is, I think, one of the hyper synths, and it's just like this huge chord, like it's just a massive chord in there, and it actually might be made up of like tritones. There's this huge
Mm-hmm.
tritone chord, so it's just fuzzy, all the way up, and it's super detuned. And sometimes I'll detune it with an LFO too, and that just kind of like is another one of those things where you're just adding a huge amount of drama to the
Yeah.
scene, right?
All right.
And like the sky's opening up and hellfire's coming out, right?
A swarm of bees.
Yeah. And just you know if you want to layer a couple of them up, I would resample it just so you have it as like a thing. And
Got it.
then I just go back to the same, like I don't even know where it is or what it's called. I just go back and like with muscle memory, basically the same bundle that I bundled out like on my album that I made like 2 years ago, and I just plucked them out. I'm
Nice.
like, I'm
Nice.
like, riser time, got to do this.
All
Here we
right.
go.
We make
Yeah,
it sound so easy.
yeah. That's 100% what I do. It's just
All right. Well, I guess I've been missing out on doing some really easy shit. So
You'll find your own way.
all right, yeah, I'll
There's
find my
yeah,
own way.
that's right.
All right,
You
next.
have to do them. You have to do them. They're a
Yes,
part of the
yes.
song, you know? Do you put
They're
melodies in your
necessary.
music? Do you put drums in your music?
It's true. It's
Do you put
true. I do have
chords?
all these things.
Gotta have some risers in there.
All right. 2026, here we come. Year of the Riser.
That's right.
All right, we're going to get into my picks now, and we're going to
Ooh.
start with Obscura Materia.
Ooh, yeah, okay.
That was Obscura Materia. I love this one. I'll first note that this is kind of a music theory experimentation song, if you will. But one, I love the sort of like choir feel of it. And then it really does showcase just switching between these chords and how it's like you go across a range of emotions and you're not quite sure where you're going next. At one moment it's like hopeful, the next moment it's like maybe a little ominous. Like it's just so interesting and like film score like. I have loved this one since the first time I heard it.
Yeah, it is one of it, like, I am trying to, like, really play with your emotions in that,
Yeah.
and make you feel almost like I'm like with the piano part. I was like, I need something to make you
Yeah,
feel
the
like there's
piano part
another.
over the top is so good.
It's there's another character there with you who's kind of bringing you to the next emotion. Like you're in
Yeah.
kind of like some sort of like ethereal world where like emotions are like little like things that you step into, or like little bulbs that you smush your head into.
And the piano's
You know,
guiding you around.
yeah, that's right. And like, it's like putting it on your head, and then it's like you're like, oh, this is so ominous, and then it's like, hey, on to the next one. Doon, 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 pulls it
Yeah.
off. Right. And all came out of experiment or talks that I was having with my boss at work. And he was like, oh, I want to sit down and talk to music theory about you, or with you. And I just kind of like unloaded these ideas on him that I kind of consider to be like some of my like personal theories of music, and like how to use augmented chords to transpose, and like how you can use them to like move around the scale shortcut. And so that whole song
Portals.
moves yeah, exactly, it moves through the portal, these augmented portals. And I'm just randomly, or by ear, I guess that's probably a better way. I keep on saying randomly, but I just mean I'm
Random
just
with much
making the decision.
intention.
Yeah, I'm just sort of like, what do I want to do with this? All right, let's make it weird, right? And so picking each one of those as I go, and I think it's just between major and minor. And I think this one's a major chord, this one's a minor chord, and the whole sort of like underlying idea of that is, if you want to do things that are interesting with harmony and structure, is to like think more about the intervals that you're moving between rather than what scale that you're in. I think I think you can get kind of hung up on like chord and scale and think that you need to like be really regimented about that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that, if you can find a way to move from one scale to another in a way that sounds natural and interesting, why wouldn't you just do that all the time? Like, write
Yeah.
your song in like 6 different keys. Like you don't need to be in a key and stay there the whole time. Like move around. Like why not?
Don't
And if
limit
you
yourself.
Yeah, and if you feel comfortable doing that as a musician, like you should be doing that. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that like when people who have a really good feel for music play music and then are like, brought into like kind of a more structured musical theory standpoint, we're like, oh no, you've got to pick a key because we got to write this little symbol on the paper here to know what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, just keep writing the right symbol on the like keep going. Like you can
We're
write
going
that
on a
symbol
journey.
that's right, you can write that symbol more than once, right?
Yeah.
Like just, and uh that, but that's not how slash chords work or whatever. I've seen people go through this struggle like professionally. And
Yeah.
I just think that when you're composing music, or when you're going for mood and feeling, like having a really great grasp of music theory helps. And then, but like it helps to know that it's optional, but like what's optional? Like it's almost kind of like one of those things where like you've got to know the rules to break them, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And if you're really struggling with music theory, or you're thinking like, I don't want to learn music theory because it's fussy and boring and there's a lot of stuff to remember. Trust me, I know. I've had all those feelings. Know that on the other side of that is like you just get unlocked, and like here's your like weapons, like
Right.
what do you want to use today to make your music with? And
Here's the rules, and here's how to break them
yeah,
for
calculate.
profit.
That's it. Calculate, right? You're just calculating.
Yeah.
And the more like, you know, I think the reason why interval is more important than scale and chord and all that kind of stuff is because it is the root of the emotion, right?
It's
Like
what
if you
builds the
sit
tension.
And if you sit down and you, yeah, exactly. If you sit down at a keyboard and you play like a minor second, like, right, you're like, oh, that's spooky, or it's jazz or whatever, right? And that has a certain feeling to it. Okay, then what's the major second? What's the minor third? What's the third? What's the fifth? What's the fourth? What's the sixth? Right? And start to kind of like, just to yourself, really explore what emotions all of each one of those intervals
Mm-hmm.
creates for you personally. You'll start to kind of build up this like alphabet of emotions. And so you're
Right.
like, oh, you know what, like, because you're like, you know, what makes something sound Star Trekky, right? Like, what is it in that piece of music that when you hear something from Star Trek, you're like, Star Trek, right? So
Right.
that's like the Star Trek interval. And I like 99, like some people say, oh, it's the Star Trek chord, or it's the this or the that. But I think you can even reduce most of those things even further. And you can be like going from, or like a tritone, like moving a tritone sounds like wonder, because you're like,
Right.
right, you're like here, and then all of a sudden you're like mind blown, and you're here. you
Yeah.
know
You
you're
start
like,
to connect the intervals with, okay, if I want wonder, here's where I can go. If I want sadness, here's where I can go.
yeah. And I think we get too hung up sometimes, or focused on the like, well, minor scales are sad and major scales are happy.
I
And I'm
must
like,
stay in one or the other to achieve my goal.
I wish I could. I wish I had like a little camera on me every time I was like, I'm gonna write a sad song and I'm starting in D minor, and then like what I end up writing sounds like cheery as fuck, and I'm like,
How did I do that?
you're like, what? But I started in minor, right?
But the intervals.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But if you, and so I think over time I just got sort of better at like, you know, yeah, that's what, like, that's a, like, again, it's one of those, like, it's one of those rules that you come across where people are like, this is what it is. And the way that it got that way is completely forgotten. Like no one has like an epistemology that's like, here's the work that allowed us to know that major
Right.
scales are happy and minor scales are sad.
We're
And
just seeing the very like reduced outcome of all this history.
yeah, that's right. You're seeing like this like completely distilled, redistilled,
Yeah.
idea, and you're not like thinking about it anymore as like a root fundamental kind of musical concept that you're building up from scratch.
Yeah.
And I think like a real musical theoretician, or like a professor or something like that, would like, hit me over the head and be like, yeah, but they did all that work already, so why are you redoing it?
Right.
Right? And you're like,
But then at the
you
same time, no one is talking about in these like learning music theory. It's very seldom that people are like, "Oh, and to evoke a feeling, here's what you should do." It's all
yeah,
like, just go to the like you have to go back to home and you have to go here for tension. When the whole point of music is to, evoke this emotion.
I bet if you had a music school and in your class you were like, nobody, I'm not teaching anything past intervals to anyone until you can prove to me that it's worth the trouble. you know right, like you need to demonstrate a mastery of this like very fun, like, you get three primary colors and you're going to draw with that only,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And until I start seeing perfect circles, no one gets the
Yeah.
no one gets blue, right?
Uh,
And I think that that's kind of like, maybe that's probably too strict, or that's probably too reductionist. But I think sometimes in music theory, we don't try to like just pick at those underlying structures a little bit more, and we're too concerned with like, well, what's good? Because you could easily just as say, as a criticism of that song, well, you're just kind of wandering around between these different emotions, and like, you don't like, that doesn't really seem to have a drive or a purpose. And
yeah. It doesn't
right,
resolve.
doesn't resolve correctly, and it's
Yeah.
unsettling to the listener. And you
Like,
could,
yeah, that's the point.
and it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, have you heard any of my other songs? Like, I thought
This
it's
stuff's
pretty
just
settling.
unsettling.
We're just
Well,
merely unsettling here.
on that note, we're gonna listen to a very unsettling song, which is Red Star.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nice.
Vacant space corrupting entities without doubts. Avaricious pilfering erected one's own house. Edifice of lies hold the fires of defeat. Holiness and enterprise strap the chains to your feet. Sleeping giants, breathless, tries, weeping, violence, reaping, silence, empty, silence, endless, cries, creeping, tyrants, needing violence.
Well, that was Red Star, and you just asked me to tell you what this song is about. I actually have
Yeah.
no idea.
Oh, okay. Good.
Well, to be honest, I didn't really study the lyrics,
Oh,
but
yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
I really love just the vocal delivery, the whisper, sinister sounding. Like, I didn't see many other songs that you did vocals on.
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious, what made you on this one? Yeah, let's do vocals.
I think I think I really I really want to make way more songs like this. And I think during Weekly Beats, I was like, this is the time to kind of toy with this idea a little bit. And I was really I've tried to put I have entire albums that I've done vocals for, or raps for, that I'm way too picky
Okay.
to put out, or to release out to the world. And so I kind of wanted to just get over that. All the vocals are recorded on this, which is a little
Oh, wow.
dictaphone, a little Sony,
That's amazing.
what do you call these things? Dictaphone. Note taker thing. Yeah.
That's
And
analog $6,000 tube analog dictaphone.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's 10,000.
That's why the vocals sound so good. So whispery.
Actually, I think I found this on the ground in my dad's place when I was cleaning it up.
So you just wanted to
Yeah.
release something with some vocal experiments.
Yeah.
What made this how did this one make the cut that some of your other vocal stuff you're like, I don't like it?
Because Weekly Beats happens once a week and it's merciless, and you just got to get it out there, right?
And Rick Rubin told me it'd be all right.
Yeah. And every week on Weekly Beats, or after I was done, I would share stuff with people at work. And so I shared the song with everyone at work, and I was like, this song, it sings about knives and separating cephalads, and don't read too much into it. I'm just horsing around. you know like, I'm just having, I'm just trying to create a vibe. I'm trying to,
Yeah. It's art. It's art.
but I'm getting, I'm trying to come to terms with how I'm feeling about certain things too, right?
Right.
And I think that that's important, is what's happening, what's happening in that song, I'm feeling, and so I'm putting it into a song
Yeah.
to get at all those feelings. And I think that we were talking while I was playing, I make all these connections between things that I don't actually always think are there, and or see, or try to project onto somebody else what they might think about it.
Right.
And I kind of feel like there's a trend in lyrics to make lyrics very literal. And I actually think the reason for that is that people want to know what it means.
Right.
And if you make lyrics and you leave them open to interpretation, you kind of are more poetic about it, people are like, I don't know what you mean, and I want to know what you mean. And I'm like,
it.
I want you to have this and take your own meaning
I want you
from
to
it.
interpret what it means to you.
Yes,
And
I don't want to
make it a little
impose
vague.
on you.
Right.
I want this to go out and live in the world as kind of its own entity that,
you can kind of make it your own by putting your own interpretation on it, versus some artist telling you this is what it should mean to you.
That's right. Yeah. And so I try to put a lot of symbolism in there, in the lyrics themselves, that are kind of magical, or things that might happen, or like ways of addressing a group of people, like kind of thinks like I think a lot about singing that song in front of a group of people. Like it's definitely what, like I'm doing these weekly live videos. I'm definitely going to be doing that song live on that channel for
Awesome.
sure. And
Awesome.
probably will like do a little solo or something like that to go with it. But yeah, like I really am trying to just address a group of people and make it in like I'm doing the type of lyrics that I want to listen to, which is just like allow this world to kind of enter my mind and bounce off all these connections that I'll make all on my own. Right.
Right. Which is so much better than just literal lyrics.
Yeah. In my opinion. Right. And
Well, it's like
yeah.
there's so much more opportunity to take more ambiguous lyrics and load them into your imagination than just like here's a literal like story lyric, if you will.
Yeah. You're right. And I think that if I, other artists or, graphic designers and painters and all that kind of stuff are listening to music and they're playing this song, that I'm not like in the background there going like, be happy all the time because it's the
Right.
right way to be or whatever, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm just like, you know, I'm some kind of synth goblin back here. And, maybe
Oh
it
my
makes them
god.
laugh. Maybe it makes
Yeah.
them feel weird, right? Or maybe they're just like, fuck yeah, this is cool. It
Yeah,
doesn't, yeah.
or paint their own picture that other people can interpret how they want,
Yeah, if there's like this really like spike in weird paintings from that week on Weekly Beats, we'll
Yeah,
know that
for
that was the
sure.
cause.
Lots of red stars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just another symbol, right? Just trying to.
Well, we are near the end of our show,
All right,
and it has been pleasure.
absolutely. Have a face to the name.
Yes, for sure. Sorry, all you other people, you don't get the face, but it's a lovely face. And I feel like there's even more I want to talk to you about, like your live set and your YouTube channel. So I will just have to move that to the Discord and
Sure.
keep a
Yeah.
lookout on your YouTube. What was your YouTube again?
It's at Matter Warlocks with an X. I'll send it to you,
Nice.
but that's what it
Cool.
is.
Cool.
YouTube
We'll
at
put it in
Matter
this in the description.
Warlocks. Cool. Oh yeah, great.
Cool. Well, my final selection that we will play the show out with is Smoky River.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So offbeat from everything else.
It's just like a very upbeat, bouncy, very different animal from Red Star that we just heard.
Yep.
But in picking songs, I was like, I don't know. There's just something about this one that it's got to make my cut. And it's just a fun groove. Great bass. You're awesome at creating bass instruments. I don't know what your magic is. Maybe I'll get a bass preset pack from you or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, just great. I love the plucks, which am definitely a fan of from Avril Cadabra. And I don't know, it's just a grooving tune.
Yeah, and this is I wrote a song, or I did a remix once of a Captain Beefhead or Captain Beefheart song. or he's just like hothead, like I think it was actually of Hothead. And again, this is another one of those songs that just keeps coming up, in like a long repertoire. Like I've probably written this same song like 3 times. And it just, I don't know I don't know why. Like to me this song is just as funny to me as it is like exuberant and fun for other people. Like I started making this and I was like, this is what we're doing this week for Weekly Beats. All right.
I love it. I mean, I imagine playing this one live and people just dancing.
That's what the original, like I did this Captain Beefheart mix was like. And if there was any deadness in my show, I could put that song on and just immediately like turn 180 that whole thing. And it was like kind of like, it was very similar, and it was just like a line it was just him saying hothead in one of his songs that I just trimmed out and just smashed through distortion and put a bunch of huge bass in there. And it was like, like a doo doo, just like a, completely 4 on the floor, 120 beats per minute, but like hothead. And like every once in a while that bass would clear out, and that would the compressor would shoot that vocal out super loud, because like, the limiter is keeping it down, and then there's no bass anymore, and then just like, and people would just go nuts for that. And this is kind of this similar, it's not quite as epic, I feel like, as that track, but it's that same vibe. And it to me, it kind of just feels like my city, like Edmonton, Alberta. Like it feels very much like it's kind of got like a country thing happening.
I could see that. Yeah, with
right?
the plucks.
Yeah, right. And it's like it's as far country as I think I'm like physically able to go.
This is your version of a country song,
right? If someone was like, make me a country song, I'd be like, gotcha. And I'd play that
for them. It's going to sound similar to this.
And they're like, yeah, you're not going to Nashville anytime soon. That's like, I'm sorry, but you just this isn't going to make it on country radio. I'm sorry.
Well, I love it, and that's why I picked it. And thanks again for jumping on here and recording this.
No problem.
I was sort of running out of interview people and ran out of I had built up a backlog of like, all right, I've got a few in the can so that if I get sick, I can, take a week off. But all that's out the window now. So I put out the open call on Discord and was like, people, I need help. And you rose to the occasion, and we booked this real quick and got it going. So thank you.
Well, your biggest fan was like, do you have anyone else who you think might want to be interviewed? And I'm like, I don't know. Just go to Weekly Beats and find those people and be like, post on their side.
Yes, Jegus has lifted a hand for sure.
Get Jegus to get them. He will find. Yeah. He's their biggest fan for sure.
It's true. He's everyone's biggest fan. Well, cool. We're gonna play it on out, and thanks again, man.
Hey, no worries. I'll talk to you later.
All right, have a good one.
Go.